the nature of discipline and keeping like even just an 11-day discipline, and we have our 40-day disciplines, and like all of the things that we plug into our world to keep us in tip-top shape, right? And especially spiritual disciplines, and what that does for all of the bodies and all of the chakras, and everything that we feel, and how we orient ourselves through these different phases and different cycles of our lives. One definition of discipline that I heard really, really early on in my journey that always has stuck with me is that a definition of discipline is to keep showing up even when the thrill has worn off, right? To keep arriving even when you're not excited about it, even when it doesn't feel like there's much progress that's happening. And in the Yoga Sutras, and with a lot of like the traditional yogic texts, this is really an outline of the yogic journey. And I think it also speaks to many facets of our life as humans and different types of relationships where we start an experience, and there's just so much that unfolds in the very beginning, and there's so much excitement around it. And especially with yoga, because we're working with the subtle body, right? There's so many discoveries. When you think about the first time that you started to kind of experience yoga or experience meditation, it just turns your world into a whole new existence. And there's a lot to be celebrated. And then there's a certain moment where we lift ourselves to a certain place, and then it's really described as a long plateau, right? That everything just kind of levels off, and it isn't, it's like kind of neither here nor there, but it's not really as exciting as when you feel like you're, just like really rushing on that incline, like up the mountain or even down the mountain type of feeling. And the encouragement then is to, right, stay in that plateau shape, continue to show up, and then something happens and we have another little pivot and a shift, and then we get into the next level of our experience, and then it's kind of the same cycle. But what tends to happen is, it's like this long hallway, right, between like the excitement and then the next level. And this is where a lot of distractions start to happen, and a lot of, like maybe we even want to subconsciously create drama in our life because there's no drama that's happening, right? Or we want to self-sabotage, we're going in a certain direction, we're being really held in the vibration, and then we get bored and the mind plays its tricks, and all of a sudden we are not showing up to our practices. And then, a couple months goes by, or, maybe even longer or even shorter, but we kind of look back and we're like, oh, wow, when I was practicing at this certain period in my life, like actually, all of these amazing things were happening, or my attitude was, in a certain place that felt so much better. And then we go through that process of, right, returning, bringing ourselves back to the mat, bringing ourselves back into the practice. The beautiful thing about yoga and all of the yogas is that none of what you do in your practice is ever lost, right? Even if you leave for years, there's still a resonance that is put into your field through what you're learning and through wherever you're at on your journey, right? So even a little bit of practice, right? Even the little bits that we're able to do, it goes for eternity. It goes a very long way, which is what is written in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So even just the little bits that we're able to do. And then when we have that return and we come back to the mat, we come back to the practice, it's such I would say for most of us, it's like a feeling of coming home, right? And then it's like that hammer over the head of like, oh my gosh, like, why did it take me a month to like come back and like start moving my body again and breathing? Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Because it's all the subconscious stuff that's happening. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, that kind of in between period, and just a reminder of a couple of things that that are helpful. There is a Yoga Sutra which describes the way that the yogi should show up to the practice. And part of that description is that the yogi shows up with great enthusiasm, right? That there's like a willingness and an enthusiastic spirit to be there in the seat, in the meditation seat, which obviously is not always easy to do. You could have a lot of pressure happening in the world, and it's hard to be enthusiastic, right? But the idea behind this is that when we have a certain level of enthusiasm, or we have a certain level of intention, or a certain level of meaning that we're bringing into the practice, but also like our reason for being there, like our reason behind practicing, what it does is it elevates us into the heart, right? And so we're moving through the practice from our heart center, as opposed to, right, these like lower vibrational kind of stuck, heavy energies. And so this allows us to create more energy. Allows us to align the spine, to open the body. It gives us the potential to feel more, and to ultimately express more, and to ultimately create more from a place of love, and not from like this lower vibrational mentality of like I have to do it, if that makes sense, right? Like we kind of like, I have to do this thing. And then it becomes pressurized, and it almost becomes like something that we have to do out of anxiousness, or we have to do it it's almost like it's coming from fear, which is this lower quality. And it doesn't allow us to access the higher vibrational aspects of the practice. So one way into this, right, is pretty obvious: to dedicate your practice to someone else, right? And that's like a big Amma teaching, who's the hugging saint of India, right? She's like, if you're going through, your miserable moment in life, go volunteer and be of service, right? Because what that does when you're projecting or being present with someone else, or you're in a situation where it's not really about you, right? It takes you out of your own psychodrama for a moment. And it is the same as what yoga does for us when we're practicing, where it just allows us to have a moment where our perspective, where our consciousness can expand, and we can step out of our own pain, and we can step out of our own anger. And, from this practice, right? Like, okay, I can, really tune in, maybe not even in this moment, but setting the dedication so that when I feel tired in the body, I can conjure more energy to move through it, because it's not even necessarily about me. And the beauty of yoga is that we release all of the attachments to what we receive, right? At the end of the practice, we release it all, we let it all go. But it's this strange technology where in releasing it, in dedicating it, it's like we receive all of the blessings tenfold, right? That practice of non-attachment. So that is one way, right? To dedicate. You can even dedicate certain aspects of the practice, certain mantras, certain things that you're doing towards different relationships in your life, to enhance the vibration of the relationship, to increase the quality there, to increase the frequency, to really hold it as sacred, or maybe there's something that needs to be healed or worked out. And the next kind of layer to it, or I don't even know if it's like another layer or if it's more parallel, but it's more about arriving with intention. And in this work specifically, a lot of the intention has to come from the observation of how you felt in the practice yesterday, especially when you're doing the same things again and again, right? Like, how did it feel to do, or like we're doing kind of this nuanced variation of sort of the same, we're kind of penetrating the same field of consciousness, right? The prosperity field, and we're working with the navel point, and this is what we've been doing this week. So when we are able to observe what we gain from the experience, how it makes us feel, then we're going to have greater intelligence of how we want to use that in the rest of the day, right? So when you show up and you practice in a specific way, and you know that because you've been practicing for a few days, the type of energy that you receive, right, and the type of maybe even visions that come through, or whatever the experience is, then you can use that and you can kind of push it through, right, all of the mudras and the mantra and the breath, and you can conduct it and you can move it and impress it out into your life. And where, right, what are the daily tasks, or what is the focus of the day? And that takes a while to cultivate, because, you know, a lot of us are just, we have the things that we do in the day because this is how things are set up, and now we're just adding the practices into it, and there's a certain feeling. But what we want to do is we want to cultivate a deeper relationship. And if we're able to cultivate a deeper relationship, we cultivate a deeper experience for ourselves, right? We're showing up and we're having our own experience, and then we're observing the experience and understanding how effective it is. And then where do I want to project the energy of that experience into my reality? And how can I then create a better reality, and a more fun reality, or a more creative reality, or whatever it might be? And of course, it's in direct relationship to whatever it is that we're practicing. So all of this is just to say that your attitude of how you approach it is totally up to you. And it's up to you. It's up to you observing your own experience and deciding, okay, I want to like up level the experience. And even if you're experiencing like a ton of pressure and there's a lot of different, you know, responsibilities in your life, we're all in these different levels of where we are. So how can I personally show up in, you know, full awareness of where I'm at in my emotional body and my energetic body and my physical body, and how can I just take it up a notch to bring it more into the heart? So we're moving from the heart, right? Moving from the heart, which means we're moving from greater presence. Because what happens in yoga a lot of times is that we just go on this kind of automatic situation, you know? And there's also a lot of those of us that are coming from like, especially Hatha Vinyasa world, there's a lot of like self-serving, you know, keeping ourselves really comfortable and really safe, and all of that is there for a reason. But then when we were practicing Kundalini yoga, it gets uncomfortable, right? And it gets very repetitive, and there's a lot more in the psyche that comes up that, you know, makes us, and I can see it a little bit, you know, in certain practitioners, even just through Zoom. And it's like, we just have to be real about where we're coming from and how can we move it into that next level for us, right? So for some of us, it might be to just have more correctness in the way that we do the postures, right? To keep a taller spine, to keep the chin tucked, to get the breath very steady, right? Whereas then there's other practitioners here in the group that are going to be more connected to the energy field, right? And you have more connection to the planets, and that reality exists for you. So, right, so you're kind of creating and connecting in that way. And all of that, right, is again, it's moving the energy up through the heart, creating more presence, creating more aliveness, and hopefully creating more effectiveness, which is really what we want. So go ahead and let's